You're live.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We'll be looking through M&A readiness for VC-backed startups. Although we've titled it VC-backed, we've actually realized, and we have Sophie with us who will help us talk about our experience with normal, everyday service businesses. We were joking just before we came on that really, even the VC-backed companies now have to start thinking like businesses rather than quote unquote startups. So looking forward to what promises to be an insightful session. Very quickly, I will start with the introductions. My background is in investment banking. Left banking for 5 years ago now to into startup space. Founded a tech startup, raised funds, bought into the dream. But over the past year and a half, I've kind of pivoted more towards helping founders solve a problem that brings us here today. Getting ready for exit, financial restructuring, and just getting value from existing investment. That's me in a nutshell. I'll hand over to Kevin to say a few words on himself.
Hi all, my name's Kevin Withane. I'm the co-managing partner of Impact Lawyers. We're a new firm that's been set up in the UK to help startups, VCs and SMEs grow and scale their businesses through providing legal and business support. I've got 24 years as a corporate lawyer, lived and worked around the world. As I was joking earlier, the only place I haven't done a transaction on is Antarctica. I'm also the founder of Diversity X, which is a community that supports underestimated founders. It's based in the UK, although our network is global. That's me.
Can you hear that? Yeah, Sophie Long. So I run a company called Second Stage. We work at the small business market. We help founders grow, acquire other businesses to scale, and also exit. I'm based between London and Dubai.
Thank you, Sophie. Between the three of us, we will cover all the perspectives that are useful to any founders thinking of M&A at this point. Okay, we structure this. We've got 60 minutes, which isn't a lot of time, but we'll make the best of the time we have. After the intros and the overview, we will look at the foundations and a bit of the market trends, what's happening right now. And then we go into the nitty-gritty, how to craft and execute an M&A. Before we get started, I will just share a link. We'll just like to understand where you are with the journey. Are you thinking of M&A? Have you started already? Have you exited before? Let's know. I will share this link in a moment. 1 second. Yep. Okay. So the link is in the chat. You can access it there. Let's know where you are. And if you'd like to add any context, please use the chat box as well to let us know any thoughts, any experience you've had with M&A. Will be good to hear from you. Okay, yeah, the link is up now, so you can click that. Otherwise, if you go to menti.com and you enter the code, that's 63038694. It will take you to. Yep, that's fine. Okay. I'll leave that there, and we'll probably come back to it later on in the session. Okay, why is M&A important? How we would like to do this is to be as interactive as possible. So though there are three of us, we would like you to add your perspectives in the chat, please, so that all of us can learn from your experiences. The key thing about M&A is that it is a primary mode of exit for VC-backed founders. That is one of the reasons why we kind of honed down to on that niche. A normal everyday business can afford to keep running as long as they're sustainable, as long as they're profitable, keep it in the family, stay happy, keep, stay on in the business for as long as possible. But every VC-backed founder, and I'll say actually almost every startup that has raised external funds needs to exit sooner rather than later. So that's one. The second thing is there are M&As and IPOs are, I would say, the two modes of exits, but M&As are primarily the main, like by far, the most common of the two. We've got some statistics later on that we'll look at. But Kevin, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so we call it the elephant in the room because my discussion. By the way, guys, you can keep your camera on. With my many conversations with sort of probably post Series A founders, but also investors, what I see is the fear or worry about bringing this up from either side as an exit strategy at that stage, to the point where founders are saying, look, the growth isn't quite where we expected it to be. We've tried to pull all of those different levers like everybody's telling us to. We're doing all of those things, but it's not, we're tailing off. If I ask, or if I talk to the VC, they're going to think we're not in it. They're going to think our mind's not focused on this. They're going to think we're not doing everything to try and get that growth that we all talked about and then why they backed us. The VC side and the conversations I've had with them is, look, we can see some of these companies coming off where we were expecting them to be. Look, we don't have the bandwidth to really help them if they really come off. But if we start talking to them about maybe we should be looking at an earlier exit, an M&A opportunity, they're going to think we don't back them. And, we go in it, our reputation is like, not only do we back the most innovative businesses, we're actually backing the founders. And they say like they're worried about that conversation of having that conversation about M&A and maybe moving towards that model earlier than maybe a later exit is reflective on them not backing that founder. To which I'm saying, like, if you guys don't talk about it, you're going to get to the point where you've lost a lot of value and you're heading towards, I guess we're going to come on to zombies in a moment, but we're going to come on to that. So we want to get them earlier. And that's why you need to be grown up and have those difficult conversations. Also, it's strategic. It's to protect both your interests. Like the VCs have to protect the interests of not just themselves, but their LPs, and the founders have a fiduciary duty to look at all options that are in the best for all of the investors in that company.
Thanks, Kevin. I mean, speaking of difficult conversations, Sophie, do you see the same reluctance with, let's say, smaller businesses or service businesses to discuss M&A, or is there what do you see from those type of businesses?
Thanks, Cody. I mean, I definitely see a similarity. What we tend to find in the smaller end of the market is that a lot of people have set up businesses because they like running them, and therefore they are unwilling to think about M&A often until it's too late, because they enjoy running their business, they want to run their business. And then what ends up happening is they call me up going, hey, I want to sell my business in the next 6 months. And I go, well, we're at least 2 years away from getting this business to a place where it could sell. And so what I really encourage people to do, regardless of what point in the market you're at, whether it's small, medium or large, whether you're VC backed or not, is just be out there in the world, have those conversations. You can always say no to an M&A offer, but if you've had a few along the way on your journey, you're getting fantastic insight in how to run your business, and you really understand what else is out there in the market as well.
Many thanks, Sophie. I'm just popped into the chat and I see there's some introductions. Many thanks, Rio, for your intro. I see, and you say that there are 25 children that we're looking for homes for. We hope this is useful for you. We hope we can help you get closer to finding homes for all of those. For everyone else, it'll be interesting to hear where you're joining us from. And if you have any specific situation like Rio has here, please put it in the chat as well, and we'll be happy to share and come back to them. There's a reluctance to talk about M&A exit, but where that leads to down the line is zombies. It's a term, over the past 10, 12 years in startup space, it's all about unicorns and decacorns and multi-decacorns. But in the past 2 years, it's all about zombies now, which are startups that have raised a fair amount of money, can raise the next round, and are just in no man's land. This we can talk about in itself for an entire hour, so I'm just going to move on and say this is what happens when founders, startup management teams, and their investors don't tackle M&A on time. You just end up in no man's land, and then you shut down. We're just joking about it as well, just earlier on, to say there's just this this default thought to say, if it's not working, just shut it down. We hope that changes. We hope people consider other options like merging two portfolio companies, selling one to the other. There's so many options. I'm so jealous of Sophie's company name. It's Second Stage. It basically just says what it is. Like Kevin, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to add there's more zombies and there's more dead companies from the startup ecosystem than there are the unicorns, decacorns, or even like whatever you call the lower numbers and that, because most of them don't survive. And they've created assets. You think about that as capital invested. That's a huge amount of essentially dead money that's just been spent. And yet they create a ton of IP, particularly if they've got to like a Series A, they've got some decent IP there already. That could go elsewhere. And as an investor, I've been on the end where I've had companies that I've invested in fail. And but I only found out about it right at the last moment, and it was too late, where it was like, what can we do? And we're looking for an emergency fire sale, and there wasn't anything really that we could get a deal done before it would go into administration. So they went into administration, or they made the choice to go into administration because there was nothing they could do to save, and they're out of cash. And it really became because there was a lack of planning early on. So, they could have avoided it. The zombie could have been avoided because the technology actually they had was great.
In speaking with investors over the past couple of months, one problem I see is the capacity isn't there, the capability isn't there, the knowledge isn't there. So hopefully what we're doing today really helps to at least close some of those gaps. Very quickly, conscious of time, I would just quickly add here, what we're saying here is M&A works for every single person. The founders, they get an exit, even if it isn't a unicorn life-saving exit, you get something for all the years you've been working. And I have a client I'm working with right now who his motivation for selling is they've been in operation for about 10 years. Tech startup, they're doing quite well, but they've realized they're never going to be venture scale. And it's like, I can continue to do this, but I don't have the firepower, the funds as bigger competitors. So let's work on an exit. Let me get something, I can go build something else. So founders get, they get value for their investment and the time. Investors obviously get return on their investments. And then the acquirer, they get something. There is something you're selling. And that takes us to, we've talked about this. We've talked about IPO and M&As. For the acquirer, what's in it for them? I think that's if there are a few takeaway points I want to leave you with, it's that thing as founders or as investors and founders that need to sell, you need to be answering that question, what's in it for the acquirer? So we'll spend a lot of time on that later on in the slides. But exits, money goes in on day one from investors. The only two ways it comes out. It's either an IPO or M&A. There are different pros and cons there. I won't spend time on that here, except to say IPOs are very, very, very rare. They're even rarer still. Stripe is a, $50 billion company, 12, 13 years old, they're still there. So IPOs are very rare. So M&A is basically the more achievable option. Even though it's more achievable, it's actually statistically very, very tough. We're looking at UK and US stats here, but I suspect the same applies across the world. If I start with the one on the right, which is the Carter data, only very, very few startups actually get acquired. I think as low as, I think across the entire pool, it comes to less than 3% of startups are able to achieve an M&A, are able to achieve an acquisition. Much less are able to IPO. The UK statistics is also very interesting. We see how that peaked in 2021, and then everything has just gone quiet again since then. So we're in a much tougher climate. Like an investor was telling me a few days ago, achieving exits is almost as hard as fundraising now, but it needs to be done. For investors, if their portfolio companies can't sell, they are out of business because they need those funds to be able to return to LPs and to be able to continue in business. This data, it's not very clear here, but of the 188 exits in the UK of VC-backed companies in 2023, there were almost 200. Only 3 were IPOs. The rest were M&As, so which goes to that point around M&As being the primary mode of exit. It's very tough. So the key message there, you need to think about what you're selling. You need to prepare on time. Again, this is one of the reasons. So why is it tough? I'd like to hear from any investors, any founders in the audience who have been part of this process. But the dynamics are, I think, what make it very complex. There are different types of buyers. You have financial buyers, you have strategic buyers. There are different types of processes. There's auction, there's proprietary, it could be bilateral, it could be a full-on process. That in itself requires a whole lot of specialty, so which lots of early stage funds, lots of early stage founders just don't have that capability and the capacity. And of course, the terms. The terms could be anything, could go on and on and on. So that's the dynamics that makes this very, very complex. Now the process. For this process, I'm starting it, if you look on that, I've said 3 to 6 months. I'm looking at this from the point of a proprietary process where a buyer comes to a startup or a small business to say, I like what you're doing, we want to acquire you. So there's that intent, there's that outreach from the buyer. It could take anything from 3 to 6 months, and then it could be much faster, it could be much slower. So that's the background for this slide. Sophie, what have you seen? What's been your experience in terms of how the process runs for, maybe this is a good time to hear you. Tell us what you can about the exit process you ran for your previous company.
Yeah, so exactly as you say, we were approached by Accenture, who were interested in acquiring us. As you said, that was a handshake with a letter of intent of what they planned to do. What followed that was many, many conversations, and they really run 2 tracks at that point. You've got one which are the standard DD, the legal, the compliance, the who does what, who are your people, checking contracts, etc. And we were running that full time. And then there's much more of a casual work stream as well, which is, who are we? What is it we're really bringing to the table? What is our real motivations for the deal? Do we get on? Can we sit around the table? Can we kick around some live projects? Can we kick around some live opportunities? And I think that often not enough thought goes into how are you going to show up for that more casual interaction, and I remember myself and the CEO having conversations every Sunday afternoon, and we would prep those conversations. What are we going to say? What are we going to put forward? How are we going to interact with each other? How are we going to make it lighthearted? How are we going to make it seem not stressful? And I think, making sure that you've got the ability and the headspace, and again, this comes down to prep, to be able to run both the very, very practical side of the due diligence alongside that more colloquial side is really, really critical. And as you said, that then moves to a binding offer where it's either, usually the lawyers jump in and scribble about things and try and change things at the last minute before you get it signed, usually at about 1 minute to midnight.
I'll add though, like having done this process both as external counsel and as internal, having the lawyers at that earliest stage, the LOI piece, is really important. One, because you can truncate that timeline, because you get less of the to and fro at the binding offer stage on the long form documents, because everybody sort of knows what the commercial deal is. If you're only engaging lawyers at that binding offer stage, what tends to happen is they don't understand the mechanics of the deal. You've had these conversations, these casual discussions. You sort of know what the intention of both parties are as the commercial team, but the lawyers don't, because they haven't been involved. And what happens is they're trying to speed catch up, but also they're trying to then over protect on risk, rather than the focus of let's get this transaction over. That is a win-win for both parties, or for all the parties involved. So recommendation, get your lawyers involved to actually look at your LOI and be part of those conversations if they're commercially enough to do that.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin and Sophie. I have a question for the audience and maybe the panel as well. Has anyone been part of any process where you've done this whole preparation stage, you've got to the handshake/LOI stage, gone very far in the process, and then the deal broke down?
Yeah, loads. To be fair, I was also one of the tire kickers. You go in, you're trying to fish. I've done it as fishing exercises as well, so you have to be careful a little bit. But I've done it as a fishing exercise where we like the look of that company because they've got a piece of technology. What can we learn by just doing some of the due diligence on it that we can just take away? But let's see if we can drag the process out. Like, it's normal. It's part of business. It's normal.
I think that's it. I have a similar experience, but I'd like to hear a bit more, Kevin, because I'm kind of sure I've seen founders who the very first offer they get, they're already thinking in their head, I'm going to buy a house there, I'm going to buy a house there. Experienced professionals know 99% of the time it doesn't close. So I'd like to hear your perspective in terms of how that fishing offer works, how many M&A offers, LOIs, term sheets, they acquire spending money, but they actually don't intend to complete the process. We'd like to hear more about that, Kevin.
Yeah, so more sophisticated, we were sophisticated in what we were doing, right? So we knew, okay, because we had investment bankers also bringing us deals, potentially. So we were looking for very strategic positioning and buys, but there was some sort of things that came up where it was like, look at this piece of technology that this guy has. You can have that as a bolt-on. We're like, we like the technology. We don't want all of the rest of it. Like we don't need to buy that company. We just want that specific piece of technology, or we want to know how they do it. So what we'd do is do like the non-binding letter of intent with some early due diligence. It's all subject. Anything further is going to be whilst we expedite the LOI. If we had to put down money, we would have that conversation, because some say, like, if you're going to do this, you need to put some money in escrow, blah, blah, blah. And that's a good, like, for founders, you should be asking that, or VCs supporting the founders, you're making sure that your founders are making sure that the sort of upfront money put in escrow so that you can recover some costs at least. And then what we'd do is do like get the due diligence team in, and we would know what we're looking for, right? So our due diligence questions are not like you bog standard. Like every due diligence question should be tailored to the business that you're looking at and what you're looking for and what you're looking to get out of it, rather than here's a standard checklist of due diligence items, tick, 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 tick. No, due diligence is about actually finding the answers to the questions you need answers to make that investment decision that you're going to make. So then we'll go in, look at that. We're still keeping the management team sweet because we're having those conversations, but the experts in the business, like legal, the accounts, the operational HR, all of those people are going into like the target with the intention of trying to find the information we're looking for. And then there'll be reasons. Mainly, we don't want all of the other stuff. So we can find reasons with that. Like, these numbers don't make sense. There's way too much headcount here to walk away from the deal, but we would have got the information we needed to, or we couldn't get it, but we know we're not going to pursue it. Which is frustrating the other side. But I've also been on the other side where that's happened to us as representing the company, where they kicked our tires and they didn't get anything from us because we sort of realized that. But you need to, that's part of the sniff test as a founder or as a VC supporting a founder, be looking for that. Like, are these are they really intending on moving forward with this transaction, or is this a tire kicking exercise?
Thanks, Kevin. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Sophie.
It's also why I really encourage people to start building relationships with potential acquirers early on, right? If you've got an idea of who those 5, 10 people could be that you're going to buy, and you've gone for coffees with them, you've maybe even done a few partnerships deals here and there, then the chances are when the LOI comes, it's actually based on much more chance of it happening, and it isn't just someone coming up. So again, all the prep that you can do can help you mitigate some of these things. Not completely, it's always going to happen. But the more conversations you've had, the more attuned you are to the likelihood of that happening.
And thanks. That was the question I was going to ask. How can founders and VCs protect themselves from this kind of behavior? And I really like that. It's about the relationship. I have something in one of the other slides, but happy to take it here, where one of the ways I see the best way to prepare for an exit is to bring in potential acquirers into the business, either as customers, clients, or ideally as investors. I see there's a guy who has been sharing a lot about the acquisition journey, sold to Adobe, and he said the acquisition was completed in 2 weeks, but they'd had a relationship with Adobe for over 5 years. They'd attended events with them, they had relationships, they had tea, they had drinks, there was an ongoing relationship for many years. And then the Adobe had invested in one of their rounds. So had information on the company, was an insider. So when the acquisition was going to happen, they just say, guys, come, we've seen enough, we're going to buy you. And it just happened very quickly. So I think that's something to think of more long-term, how to build those relationships in a way that it goes beyond just having a conversation, but it's strategic before the acquisition.
Yeah, I've got some examples of we talked about it. Actually, maybe I'll save those for when we do the case studies. I'll talk about some of those examples.
Okay. And I see the comment from Kala here about transactions that failed the DD stage. Maybe that's another point. There's all sorts of DD. If we focus on maybe the major ones, the people due diligence, operational, legal, financial. There's so many things that can go wrong. But I mean, if we wanted to, maybe this is one of those things where we can actually have a full session on DD. But Kevin, Sophie, what's one sentence on DD? How can funders mitigate the risks of actually failing DD for a serious buyer?
Make sure that you're really honest up front. Don't leave gremlins for them to find a week before they're about to close. You'll just erode all of the trust.
I like that.
And prep before you're even starting to talk to investors, like have a data room. Like I tell founders now for on investment rounds, treat everything like your data room just doesn't stop. It just gets updated constantly. So it's the right amount. Like after you've done 3 years, or if it's been 3 years, you take those documents out because they're not relevant. They're never going to be relevant for DD. But keep it updated. But for an acquisition, you should be ready, because actually that process of getting all of the documentations that are likely to come up. So in that scenario, use the standard checklists and then get your DD room ready before you're going to kick off, or even really start entertaining the process, or if you're just starting to have those conversations. Because once you've done it, you can keep updating it and keep refreshing it, and then you just have to add, because that can hold up a acquisition by a few weeks, which then can then end up being longer because more stuff are added, more questions are asked because they weren't there. That actually at the back end of a transaction, you slow it down to the point also. And also you want a quick answer of, yes, are we going to take this a bit further? It's because both sides have to spend money at that point. Or is this, you're going to done DD, you're going to walk away. Cool, that's fine. We're going to keep going. And you want to limit time as well. And sometimes there's exclusivity periods.
Cool. I mean, one quick thing on the DD process as well. I see something where it's almost psychological, where a buyer asks for information and then the sellers come back within 24 hours. Here's everything you need. They ask a question again, and then you come back very quickly. Assuming a very serious buyer, that sends a message that, you know what, we're prepared, we're organized. It's psychological. It just leaves the buyer, oh gosh, okay, these guys are serious. Beyond it just smoothing the process, and then the opposite is the case as well, where you ask for information and then they go back and forth and they can't answer your questions. It leaves the buyer thinking, should we be having this conversation?
Yeah, as a seller, you want to be in control of the process. So you want to drive it, you're in a better position. Yeah. Basically, negotiate from the position of strength because you don't want to get, ultimately, the longer you take, you give them time to work through those numbers in depth, right?
Yeah.
And find those gremlins or find those things that they can then, what they're going to do, if they want to do the deal, they're going to do the deal. They're just going to cut the price. They're going to keep happing away at the price to get those gremlins covered. So by keeping the pressure on, you're driving. So make sure you're driving the timetable.
Yeah, we've got a question here from James. He's asking, what percentage of inquiries will you estimate to be serious versus fishing exercises?
Yeah, I was going to say, it truly depends on sort of industry, types of companies, where you what stage. I'd say probably like 15 to 20%. You tend to know, or you tend to have a gut feeling. I think when you're speaking to them, you sort of know, like, by the way they're asking the questions, the sort of things, you know, the buyer would pressure you on things that are confidential. They want to know about your customer numbers, what's the cost of sales, those sorts of things. You can sort of tell, or on the sort of technical aspects of the technology that you have, they want to understand that. And look, if you put yourself in their position, like if you gave them that answer, can they reverse engineer anything? Like they're the ones like you can tell a lot easier. But you sort of go through the process because it's a bit harder. Just make sure how much time and money you're spending on it.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay. This is one of those slides that could be an entire discussion in itself, but I'm glad we got to spend some time dwelling on this. Okay, key thing here is, again, just to emphasize, is this is for a process where it's an outreach from the buyer. If it's a process, an auction where the seller says, you know what, we need to sell, we are in trouble, or we have a strong motivation to sell, it will look very different. Generally saying that process that we showed on this slide is at the end, it's like the actual activity. But in terms of all the things that go into that, there's a whole lot of work that gets you to get that handshake. How do you get to that handshake? How do you get that interest, that LOI? We'll look at it at the end of this session. We'll spend some time talking about how to get yourself in a situation where you're getting those LOIs. I think we touched on this. If you're getting an interest from an acquirer, it's most likely not the first time they're hearing about you, or if you're getting an actual offer, a firm offer from a serious buyer, most of the time there's been a long-term relationship. So we'll see some examples as we go along. Okay, getting into the next section, we'll just look at a few case studies and answer that question, what is in it for the acquirer? This is very similar to the fundraising process, but a bit more, I'll say a bit more niche, a bit more important in terms of there must be something they're buying. Very quick example from the US. I think if I recall correctly, MailChimp was bootstrapped, and then they sold out for 12 billion to Intuit. At the time of that sale, they were a market leader. So definitely there was something. There was something Intuit really wanted in MailChimp. And the rationale here says they wanted to, MailChimp had built a reputation with small businesses that Intuit felt was very valuable, and they paid top dollar for it. Which takes us to the value drivers. The question being answered here is, what are you selling? in an ideal, I'll just run very quickly through this and then open this up to discussion. But starting with traction, that is the financials. It could be financials, it could be customer story, it could be profitability. It could be presence in a market where the seller isn't and wants to be there. So there's something in terms of financial and perhaps a bit non-financial as well that is really attractive to the seller. The second thing is capabilities. For startups, VC-backed startups, it's pretty simple. It's most of the time it's technology. Maybe it's a product or a technology that has achieved a whole lot of progress in the market. The buyer wants that. It looks good to them. They'll come to you for that. And then the last one is people, which again, I'm sure for Sophie will see this as well. For a lot of service businesses, people are the business. And we're seeing that with a lot of the AI startups now, where the tech giants are paying billions of dollars basically to just handcuff talent and say, we'll pay you to just come sit here. You may be valuable to us, but keeping you out of the market means nobody else can have access to you. So these are the three things I see are the key value drivers in an acquisition. Sophie, over to you. From what you've seen from your own process, how do you see these three play out?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. That combination is absolutely the sweet spot. The thing that I would add is that when people are starting to pitch their business, get it ready for an acquirer to be interested in it, they often talk about the people. And the slight mistake they make is to say, the people we have right now are great, right? Therefore, you should buy me. But if I'm an acquirer, and this was particularly relevant when I was buying companies for Accenture, where we knew not every company that we bought, 100% of the staff were going to stay because they wanted to work at a startup, not at Accenture. Actually, there's a risk in the people you've got now. What I wanted to know was, are you really skilled at replacing all the people that you've got? Can you continually hire more of them? When I grow your business, am I going to be able to have more people like the people you've already got? Or am I going to hit a cap, in which case I won't be able to scale that video? And so starting to think about what I call a people machine, a people engine, when you're getting ready to sell your business can be really, really critical. And the difference between someone paying an okay price for it and going, oh, wait a minute, I feel really confident now that this has got an engine here, that when I pay all this money for it, I'm going to be able to deliver on the promise of the growth.
Yeah, I'd say on that people piece, ensuring there's a culture that can be transponded is one thing. The people, though, as a buyer, you may not want. I've been on that situation where we didn't want them. In fact, I was on recently, in just as a personal thing, as a part of a group, we were bidding to acquire a brewery out of administration. We actually didn't get accepted by the administrator. We were going to take on the 37 people they had. The company that they actually ended up choosing to go with to buy the business was one that was going to basically get rid of the entire business. They only wanted the digital. They only wanted the digital assets of this company, they wanted the brand. They didn't want the people. And so, different buyers have different needs or wants, and being able to, for the seller to be able to scale down is really, really important. How can you do that? And manage expectations.
I have a very question for you, Kevin. When you say digital assets, were there any IP, were there any secrets or patents that the buyers wanted? What was it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they operate another of other breweries, so they would the brand's great. It's in lots of places. People know it. I mean, they just wanted the brand assets. They don't need the people. We didn't need the factory. We had the distillery. They didn't need any of that. They didn't need the tap rooms. They've got their own distribution outlet. They just purely wanted the brand, and they put in a slightly better cash offer than us, to which the administrator said, we're going to go for the cash offer. We're not that fussed about what happens to those people. Unfortunately, then the owners of that business had to go and tell those people, yeah, we've sold it to this company who are buying it in administration, and basically you're all going to be made redundant.
Very interesting. I mean, Sophie, what do you see from, I mean, comparing the people from a buyer's point of view now, buying people of a seller of a company? How do you see, say something, talking about one of the capabilities, like the brand, how do you see sellers approach acquiring a brand in the market?
What do you mean, as in practically, or what it is that they're looking for?
Putting it this way, if I were a seller and I said, you know what, I've got a very strong brand, which a bigger competitor or a bigger player in the industry does not have with a certain segment, how would you, if I were that kind of company trying to sell, how would you suggest I go approach, say, potential acquirers if my strongest suite is the brand?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do that is always through trying to do some kind of partnership. You know, is there something that their brand can bring to the table that you think could work well together? And even if you know that deep down that isn't going to happen, it's just a good way of getting you in front of people who can get to know you and talk about it. One of the things you do have to be very aware of, and I've seen some companies fall into this trap though, is you go through a potential acquirer and you tell them how much better your brand is than theirs. And yeah, not a great way to set up a relationship with someone that you want to give you a load of money. So you've really got to think about what is the way that you can talk about your brand in a way that feels a little bit objective, not subjective, and doesn't talk about the negatives of the person that you're trying to either impress or get interested in your brand. It would be my advice in that scenario.
Yeah, thanks for that. Like we said, in this business, the relationships are very important. So this slide, this discussion, I think leads into a potentially, exhaustive exercise where founders and startups and their boards, I mean, for VCs in the room, have to generally sit down and say, what are the valuable items we have? And for the best companies, there'll be different items in all of the different boxes. I mean, the more you have, the better it is, the easier it is to sell, right? So I think this is, I would say, a starting point, and we'll touch on it later, but I think it's important to actually really know what you're selling, and then for each buyer to be able to understand what is important to them. I think that Kevin's example was really spot on, where they don't care about the people. If imagine if the seller didn't bother talking about every other thing they had because they thought, oh, our people are the best. No, this particular buyer doesn't care, but at least there's something else you have which they were able to agree on. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, and just a question, and try to just get your thoughts in. For the VCs, for the founders who are thinking of selling, what will be, if you are going to go to the market today, which of these three areas would you say will be your strongest point where you pitching that as your value to acquirers? Anyone wants to unmute and say something here?
I think they have to put it in chat because I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Okay, so maybe in chat if you can. Okay. Oh, okay. So going back to the three, so it's attraction, which is largely financial. Capabilities could be tech or brand, and then people. Okay. Gloria says capabilities. Interesting. Yes. I mean, I think, looking at it, there's a lot that sits within that. I mean, I will share this story anonymously, but one of the best acquisitions I've worked on was one where the buyer was very deliberate and strategic about what they were offering. Tech startup, and when it started off, they came up as a regional solution to another brand that was known globally. So they built their tech stack to mirror this this other global player. They set everything up in a way that their intention was to sell to this bigger company. Fast forward 2 years later, they got these guys to invest in their Series A, and 12 months after that, they sold for something close to $400 million to this player. I mean, I think that's it could be rare where deliberate strategy from the beginning to sell, but it could just be that being deliberate, setting up your company in a way that it can sell, maybe just makes it easier for the acquirer. Like one of my PE guys says, acquiring a company, if you're a big company, acquiring a small player is very risky. So, where the capabilities align, where you have a long-term relationship, mitigates the risk for the buyer and means there's a bigger chance that the deal closes.
Yeah, I've got some clients actually on that who are actually building from day one. Like they know who they've got a very strong idea who their acquirer is going to be because of the type of market they're in. So their technology's built around that client, but that potential exit client, it's adaptable for the other players in the market, but they sort of roughly know. They don't sell this to the investors, but they say they can name all of those players who would be potentially acquirers, as well as then saying, obviously, the other option is we IPO. The savvy investors, obviously, are the ones who are going to go, yeah, we can see that. So how do we grow this? So it attracts those. And then early on in there, once they've built the initial offerings, they're starting to then slowly target those companies as potential customers or partners in a strategic way, because they want to be in front of them, building those relationships.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Thanks for the exhaustive insight, Rio. Thanks, Gloria. I see that everyone thinks, I think from the responses, it looks like capabilities is one of those strongest points. For everyone, I think everyone should have access to the meeting chat. Rio has shared like very interesting insights from their operations. Having two businesses, complementary businesses, and at some point bringing them together, say, guys, talk to each other and see where we can merge this. Okay, you can tell this is one of my favorite slides and topics in this whole thing, but in the interest of time, we'll move on. Okay, key thing, I think Kevin touched on this. You determine what your capabilities are, but then you need to get out there and make sure that potential acquirers know who you are. I think, was it Sophie as well that says or Kevin, I think both of you did actually, you need to have an idea who your potential acquirers are and start to build those relationships. We've kind of touched on this. Every single one of these is a suitable acquirer. I have a client now who his term sheet, the term sheet they have on the table has come from a customer, a client. Yeah, actually don't have client in this, but the fifth option there is a client. They've got a client who's been paying for their services for a while. And all of a sudden, these guys are thinking, maybe we should have you in-house. Maybe we should control the value chain. And then they are now discussing a potential acquisition. So every single one of this is a potential acquirer. And it's probably worth having all of this in your discussion. But so the example there, another example from the US, Inflection and Microsoft. Microsoft was an investor. They were a competitor. They were, I don't know if they were a customer, but they were more than one of those buckets, and ended up buying them for $1.3 billion. And if I recall correctly, this was a kind of people deal where they wanted those founders in-house and to keep them out of competitors. Kevin, and we're running out of time, but you wanted to share something, a case. There was a case, a specific example you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I'll give you two quick examples. So one was a personal exit, a company I invested in. They had some institutional investors, family offices, angels like me. Pretty early on, I think they realized like we're not going to be able to, we've got some VCs, but we don't think we can hit the traction that they want and the growth that they want. So they actually did get rid of that elephant in the room, had the conversation and said, look, on the next round, we believe this investor is going to come in. They potentially will come in and look to acquire us at some point, but they want to test us out because they've had some feelers already. The VCs sort of, I guess the institutionals agreed. I didn't get a choice. I was an angel investor, but as a lawyer for them, I also chatted through the strategy and I was like, this is great. Like, I'll get an exit. So yeah, whatever's good. And so the company invested into them. They took a 30% stake and said to them, look, build this up for 2 years. If you get it to this valuation at that point, we'll buy it. If you want, we can then keep you on an earn out, and if you can take it further, then there's that additional optionality for a bigger exit for the founders. I think for us all, like the investors, we were happy because actually they had realized they can't hit the growth that you needed, so it was better to get an exit from it because we knew it wasn't going to get that 100 million revenue and that huge X at it. So why not get an exit so we get that money back? And I can't share who it is because the way the deal is structured doesn't actually end till later on, so I can't announce it. But it gives me an exit and it gave all the others an exit, plus it gave the founders an exit with the option of an earnout if they wanted it. I think everybody won in that situation. The other one was with a competitor. So at the company I worked at, after doing an IPO, our first we had to acquire because it was in the market where the industry was changing. We didn't have the technology or anything, so we looked at a competitor. It was actually a much bigger competitor, so it was a 1.3 billion buyout. We pretty much got everything till the board said we're not sure. I think they just didn't have belief in the management team that they could pull it off. So actually we'd done most of the work. We were close to wanting to be able to sign and execute, and actually the board ended up pulling out, getting cold feet and saying we're not sure. Like a company with 3 billion in revenue and a market valuation of 1.5 is actually going to take this company with a 1 point something billion revenue and be able to flip it. It was too big, they thought.
Thanks, Evan. Okay, getting close to the end and we'll spend some time on this last slide, basically answering the question, how do you get from where you are now to getting the interest from buyers? We've touched on a couple of these points, but I'll very quickly run through this and then get some more and share some insights around the room. We've keeping alignment. One of the funny things, not so funny if you are in a deal, is when a conversation has gone on for 6 months and then all of a sudden you realize either the founders are not aligned with themselves on selling, or the founders haven't run an acquisition through the board. And then maybe it's time to sign something. They're like, oh, well, founder, you can't sign anything. You've got investors, and you've got a board of directors, they need to sign. And they're like, oops, really? So very important, get that alignment, understand what you're selling, understand your value drivers. We talked about a buyer long list, a short list, getting intel on them, understanding what is important to them and how you can pitch yourself. Kevin, this is one of the things you brought up as well, the restructuring, getting everything in shape, getting the DD in place and making sure that all is in order. And then second stage, you get the offer. Key thing to realize the companies are bought not sold is a famous term in M&A. And the key thing there is to say the best thing you can do for yourself is to position yourself to be able to get an offer from a buyer. If it comes to a point where you're desperate for a sale, you've almost lost. Working with a client now where I've told him the first thing you do is to make sure that you get your house in order and you can actually grow and survive without an acquisition. So when you're going through an acquisition, you can still run your business and not pin your entire hopes on that acquisition. So very important. And then the deal process, I'm sure, that could be a discussion for another day, or we talked about it anyway, how the deal starts, the conversation starts, and there could be different intentions and it may just never close. So yeah, this is synopsis of the the M&A strategy. Conscious we have 4 minutes left, but Sophie, Kevin, any short any points on in terms of the M&A strategy?
Start early.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one other for me is as you're thinking through all of this, it can be very easy to get into sales mode. I'm going to big myself up. I'm going to talk about how great I am. I'm going to talk about how I've tried everything. I've done everything. We're the best we could possibly be. And actually, that's not what investors or acquirers, sorry, want to know. They want to know where they can turn the dials to give you that next stage of growth. And so just starting to shift your mindset a little bit from some of the mindset you might have when you're pitching just for money can be really helpful in getting acquirers to be really interested in you as well.
Yeah, I guess it's leaving some flesh on the table for the acquirer to actually amp it up.
Yeah.
Back to that question that you're answering, basically around what is the need for the acquirer? If whatever they're buying now, there has to be a story around how you're going to take them from, I mean, as a seller, as a company, being part of that group, how you're going to help them achieve some greater success in the future. Yep. Okay. So I'm conscious this is like the meat of the conversation. This is what we want to leave you with to think about. And if you, at any point in time, you want to discuss any of the points here, you need help, you reach out to us. Before we leave, we've got a few minutes left. I just want us to show the poll we had earlier on, and I'm just going to reshare it as well. If you weren't here when we started, I think most people weren't here. The poll just asks the question. You're trying to understand where you are with the M&A process, and then there's a second question in there as well. So I will share and let's run through how that is going. Yep. So there should be two questions that come up. Please check that out. Okay. This is where we are. We have, from the answers we have, there are a couple of VCs. They're a lot thinking about it. There's some in preparation. And I think we've had some comments there. There is a second question there, which I think if you click next, you should see this. The question there is, which of this, I mean, given this overview, this first one we've gone through today, which topics would you want us to go through next? Let me see, I may need to launch that. Let me just launch that. So, okay. Okay, I think that should be up now. You should be able to see the second question. Okay, if yeah, we have 1 minute left. If you have to leave, thank you very much. Thanks so much for joining us. This is the first session, but from your responses, looks like we should have we'll have more. So if before you leave, or I mean, you can open up the file and feel free to pop in your comments in there, and we'll look at it, and hopefully we'll be able to pull everyone together again. Just going to share this, and then Kevin and Sophie, over to you to wrap up.
You want to go, Sophie?
Sure. Yeah, look, I think we're all poking at the same thing, which is, that there's certain things that acquirers are going to be interested in. The earlier that you can start thinking about designing your business to suit those aims, and the more likelihood that you're going to get acquired. Now, what that doesn't mean is doing that at the expense of running your business. Clearly getting your business to be successful, it has to be the number one thing. But having someone alongside you who just every now and again you can kick these things around with, I think can be really valuable, just to make sure you're not going completely down the wrong route if acquisition is really critical to your exit.
Yeah, and I'll just add, having those conversations earlier and being strategic in your planning so that you aren't trying to do one thing. You should be able to continue your business whilst looking at and exploring these options. But the only way to do that is to start early, because if you don't give yourself enough time and your business is starting to struggle, then you're going to be pushed into a way that doesn't maximize your value or your return, and ultimately compensate you for the hard work you've done over 10, 15 years. potentially.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We have used up all the time. We could have gone on for much longer, but keen to stick to the time. Hopefully, we'll come back to you, and we hope you'll join us for maybe a deeper dive into one of these areas next time. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Nice.
Can you stop recording? And then we have a quick chat, Kevin.